More people every day are ditching animal products, embracing plant-based foods, and speaking up for what matters. With my experience as an international instructor for vegan nutrition and an award-winning author, I interview experts, innovators, and celebrities about the global movement towards a plant-based future. Do you want to learn how to combat the injustice in our food system affecting your health, the animals, and the planet? Well, you're in the right place. It all starts here with Eating Like You Give a Damn. Welcome to the Eating Like You Give a Damn podcast, the place to discover your passion for plant-based living one bite at a time. I'm your host, Stephanie Harder. Over the past 4 years, the term vegan has regularly hit the headlines in such a positive way. From Beyonce praising the health benefits of veganism in 2015 on Good Morning America, to the innovative car company Tesla announcing in 2017 its advancement towards a 100% vegan interior for all their car models, to Burger King, McDonald's, and KFC rolling out plant-based alternatives to their flagship meat-based offerings throughout 2019. Sustainable and cruelty-free choices to just about everything you can think of have popped up around the world. And large meat-based corporations have taken notice of the rising demand and are investing big money into meatless innovations. And who better to give us the scoop on all things vegan in the media than award-winning journalist and PR consultant, the magnificent Katrina Fox. Katrina Fox is the founder of veganbusinessmedia.com, host of the Vegan Business Talk podcast, and author of Vegan Ventures, Start and Grow an Ethical Business. She has written extensively for niche and mainstream media for 17 years on animal advocacy and ethical business, and was even a regular Forbes contributor specializing in writing about vegan and plant-based businesses. Katrina lives in Sydney, Australia, and during our interview, we talk about Katrina's 80-20 rule for sharing the vegan message in the way a business would when marketing to a mainstream audience, and how to determine when to use the terms plant-based or vegan. Whether or not there is such thing as objectivity in journalism, and I know you'll be stunned to hear Katrina's answer to that, and what changes that she is seeing in the global marketplace for plant-based foods today, and how it will impact our future. Plus, Katrina talks about how she helps vegan business owners in approaching the media the right way to maximize opportunities for free publicity. So if you're thinking of getting publicity for your vegan venture, be sure to listen to the end for that. Before we sink our teeth into Katrina's expertise, I want to talk to the health coaches who are listening. According to metadata, health coaching has emerged as a $6 billion service market with a strong growth outlook. With the rise in awareness about the impacts of our food choices, plant-based health and wellness coaches are in high demand. The problem is that many coaches don't know how to set up an online program that attracts the clients who are looking for their services to overcome a major life or health challenge. So I decided to create a group where plant-based coaches can learn how to serve more people online and build a business they love. Go to eatinglikeyougivadamn.com/coaching to learn more. And now, on with what all the vegan buzz is about. Here's my chat with Katrina Fox. Miss Katrina Fox, welcome to the show, my love. How are you?
Hey, Stephanie. I'm very well, and I'm delighted to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
Well, it is a super delight for me because I've been following you for quite some time. You're one of my heroes, actually, as far as your work with entrepreneurs and other business owners that are in the plant-based and vegan space. So I'm really, really excited to have you here. So thank you for all you do, by the way.
Thank you, and likewise.
So tell us a little bit about your background. Like, what kind of food did you grow up on? And when did you have this moment of realization that, I don't want to eat this anymore?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from the UK, although I live in Sydney, Australia. I've been living here for a while, but I'm actually from the UK. So I grew up in a very working class family, in a council flat or apartment for the Americans, in the UK. And so we were eating, I mean, certainly not healthy kinds of food, things like, fish fingers and mashed potatoes and, kind of not terribly healthy things like that. And it's when I was actually 11, I asked my mum, I said, look, where does the beef burger come from that we eat? And she said, oh, it comes from a cow. And I said, oh, what do you mean it comes from a cow? And she said, oh, it was once a cow. And once I joined the dots, aged 11, that, what I was eating was once this beautiful, being, this beautiful animal, because I'd always had an affinity with animals, even though I didn't grow up in the country. Every summer I would go down for a few weeks to stay with my cousin in the country. And so I would see cows in fields and I'd go up and talk to them and give them apples. So I was horrified when I found out that the beef burger was once this living animal. So I said, well, I'm not eating it anymore. And of course, then I made the connection, oh, the fish fingers we're eating are fish. The chicken we have on Sunday, it's actually this bird, this live bird. And I was just like, it was awful. I was very traumatized. So I said to my mum, I said, I'm not eating animals again. Of course, that didn't go down very well. Because remember, this was a long time ago. And, Mum was like, oh, we've got to eat that. I said, I'm not eating it. So then she switched to giving me things like cheese pancake type things. And these are all stuff that you buy like from the store. So this is like, you buy it frozen and you heat it up kind of thing. The only things that, like vegetables were mostly from tins that we ate, apart from the mashed potatoes. And then on a Sunday, she insisted on putting chicken on my plate, which I wouldn't eat, but we had a cat at the time, my lovely cat Kitty. So I would just like literally feed him. He'd get his own portion of chicken and then he'd get mine, so he was happy.
He must have loved you.
He was delighted. In the family. Absolutely. He was delighted. So it didn't really kind of go down very well, but I stuck to my guns even at a young age. It took me a while to become vegan though, because I think as many of us, we are all taken in by the multi-billion-dollar advertising from the animal agriculture industry. So I just thought, oh, well, dairy, there's nothing cruel about that. The cow doesn't die. And, oh, yes, happy cows in fields and where we're meant to eat milk and all of that kind of thing. So I didn't go vegan until many years later, 22 years ago. I actually was on an animal rights protest as a vivisection demo, and I was on a coach trip with a group called London Animal Action at the time, and I was sitting next to a school teacher called Kay, who was absolutely lovely, and I pulled out my sandwich, which was a Marmite and cheese sandwich. I said, would you like one? And she said, oh no, I'm vegan. And I said, the cheese is animal free, like, it's vegetarian cheese, it's animal free rennet. I was, really pleased with myself, thinking, I'm doing really well on the animal rights front. And then she explained about the dairy, because I said, what's a vegan? She started to explain about the cruelty involved in the dairy industry, that mothers' babies are taken away from them, that they spend their lives just, being kept pregnant, perpetually pregnant and giving them birth. And then, they said the baby's taken away. And I was just like, the penny dropped again. So I had that same sort of experience, except I think I beat myself up a bit more because I was an adult and I'd been doing animal rights activism because I went vegan in 97, but I'd been doing animal activism on and off from around about 1987. So I thought, how did I miss this? I was outside McDonald's and outside vivisection ads. I thought, how did I miss this? I was wearing leather because I thought, oh, well, it's a byproduct. The animal's not dying specifically for the leather, which I now know, of course, not to be true as well. But I was kind of like, how could I not know that? I was like, how could I have been so stupid? So I kind of did that for a little while and I felt guilty. But I was one of those people that pretty much went vegan overnight. So I came back from that demo, came home to my wife, Tracy, and I said, right. I said, I'm now vegan. I said, we're not eating any cheese. This is why. And she was just like, what? Because like at the time she had a house in France and we would go down there. We'd go to France. And of course, France is known for its cheese. So then I had to try and find vegan cheese. Now, if you're listening to this nowadays, you have got it really, really lucky. Believe me, there is such a variety of amazing vegan cheeses. Back 22 years ago, not so much. Most of the vegan cheeses, what little there were, tasted like rubber. So every time I'd go to the shop and I'd bring back some cheese, and Tracy and I would taste it and we'd be bitterly disappointed. But, you know, I guess for me, because it was an ethical thing, so the health benefits I had no idea of. For a few years, I will admit I was a junk food vegan. So I just replaced whatever I was eating as a vegetarian. So pizza, no cheese at the time. Now, of course, you can get vegan cheese on pizza and everything, but back then you couldn't. I was like, right, can I eat like jammy Dodgers? They were my favorite biscuit, you know, and I was like, right, are they vegan? Yes, great, I can eat those. These ones, chocolate, whatever they are, no, not those, have to switch out. So I was just looking for vegan versions of the junk food that I was eating.
Sure.
And it was really difficult back then. But I guess for me, because it was an ethical thing, one of my favorite chocolate bars was called a Twix, a British Twix. And I remember like going to buy petrol or gas, you call it in America, and they would have the, you know, the confectionery right at the till, you know, as you're paying, because they want you to only pay petrol. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there would be a Twix. And I remember thinking, oh, I really want a Twix. But what I did in my mind, and this might be helpful for people, you know, listening, is that instead of seeing the Twix as that, you know, thing that gives you comfort, that's so delicious and amazing, when I looked at it, I saw a cow, heavily pregnant cow, mooing in grief with her baby being taken away. Plus, I found out that obviously dairy has a certain amount of infected pus and blood in it. So with all that combined, the Twix, do you know what I mean? It was like, I'm not just buying a chocolate bar to give me instant gratification. This is what it represents. So that, you know, there was no way I caved or anything. So, and then after a while, it becomes kind of automatic. So whenever I see something that's not you know, obviously not vegan, you know, I have, even no matter how delicious it is, or how delicious it might look, I immediately in my mind see behind it, and what's really there. And that way I'm kind of like, no, and I don't feel I'm missing out. Do you see what I mean? So yeah, that's kind of basically my vegan story. So I pretty much went vegan overnight. Yes, it took a little while to replace the shoes, you know, but we pretty much, and Tracy, I was quite lucky actually, because I know for people who've got families, it might not be as easy but Tracy, my partner, she was pretty much on board straight away. So she was a bit frustrated about the cheese, as we both were, but she got it. And once I explained to her, the only thing was she was kind of concerned, because she thought, oh, you know, where are we going to get our protein? Where are we going to get all our vitamins and our minerals? Once she started to do research, she came back, she said, you know what, this vegan thing, she said, it's actually really good for your health. And of course, it wasn't the time, because, you know, I wasn't eating, you know, terribly healthy. So then I kind of was like, oh, really? So then we started to eat a lot more healthily. And so I kind of converted her to veganism, but she helped to bring me onto a more, you know, to include more healthy things. I mean, don't get me wrong, I will still enjoy a vegan pizza or a vegan chocolate as a treat. But back then it was like, I've got to have vegan chocolate every day. I went to my health food shop, ironically, the local health food store, and I found this amazing chocolate by it's actually the UK's, I think, oldest vegan company. They were the first people to make soy milk, called PlantBased, and I think they've rebranded now to So Free. They're an amazing company, and they had this lovely bar of chocolate that tasted like this other brand that I used to like that was dairy based. So I went to my health food shop and I would say, right, can you get, you know, a block of 6 of these? And then I'd go back, you know, 2 days later and I go, oh, can you get me some more? And he'd go, oh, he said, are you having a party? And I said, no, they're for me. And I think that kind of planted the seed that maybe I've got a little bit of a problem. It was almost like he was my dealer, you know, with my vegan chocolate. I'm like, I need my fix, get me some more. So Tracy helped to kind of bring me on to, you know, the health side of things, and that things like the chocolate and the pizza are nice treats, but I'm not going to be eating them every single day, and, you know, started to eat more healthy, you know, fruit and veg and everything. But for me, the health and the environment were bonuses, which is great. But for me, it's always been, from an ethical side for the animals, not to participate in animal exploitation, you know, not to give money to companies that are funding animal cruelty and exploitation. So, yeah, that's my vegan story.
Right, absolutely. And I think so many people that are listening can absolutely relate to that, because at some point along the line of their journey, you know, they're you know, maybe they've just started to open their minds to eating plant-based because of the health promotion of that. and others are coming to that side more on the ethical side. But it is definitely a process of learning a little bit at a time. And I know that some of us, can probably make an easy transition overnight. Others, not so much. Like you said, they have families and other people in their lives to consider, other, things that are kind of going on in their environment to consider. So, but anybody that makes the decision to start heading in that direction is such a beautiful thing. And I love celebrating that when I hear, that spark comes on, and they start to move in that direction.
Definitely. I mean, I see, because I spend a lot of time at the computer. So once a month to once every 2 months, I see a chiropractor just to kind of, do some adjustments and, make sure that, like a maintenance thing. So I've got healthy back. And whenever I go there, I never initiate the conversation. I mean, when I had my first appointment, I said, I'm vegan. So he knows that every time I go, he asks questions about veganism, about plant-based eating. And I'm just really, nice and friendly and just sort of explain things. And so then he says to me a few weeks ago, he said, my wife and I are having a vegan night once a week and we are loving it. When I went back just a couple of weeks ago, he said, we're up to 2 nights now. He said, and actually, he said, I don't want to eat eggs anymore. He said, I think I'm a pescatarian. I was like, oh, wonderful. He said, what do you think about that? I said, it's fabulous. I said, you're on your way. I said, it's not the destination. I said, think of it as a train journey. Vegan is the destination, but you can get off at these stops, have a little look around, and then you get back on. And he laughed and he was like, yeah, great. And so I was invited to a launch recently of these, like Beyond Meat has got their Beyond Burgers and Beyond Sausages. Well, there's an Australian company that's done something similar. So producing very realistic, plant-based meats and burgers. And they gave us some to take away. And I've got them in the freezer. And every time I open the freezer, because they look so realistic, for a split second, my brain goes, what's going on? There's dead animal parts in my freezer. And then I remember what it is. So I'm actually giving them to him. So I've said to him, have you got a freezer here at the chiropractic office? And he said, yes. So next time I see him, I'm taking him those because it makes it exciting. He's really, he's looking forward to it. And he said, they're just loving experimenting with it. And he said, I'm really starting to get it. And I think that's because I'm not going to put it just down to me, but I think it's because, I'm not being judgmental. I'm not being critical. I'm encouraging him, because that's how Kay, the school teacher, was with me. Like when when she explained to me when I pulled my sandwich out on an animal, I was on a coach full of animal rights people. And, I pull out a sandwich with dairy cheese in it. She could have got, how dare you bring that onto, the bus, on an animal rights demo, but she was so nice. And, I asked questions and and I watched her as well. She was a really good advocate for animal rights. I mean, some of us were like, with our, placards going, yelling, because there's something quite cathartic about that. But I noticed Kay would always chat to people and give them leaflets, maybe because she was a school teacher. She had really good communication skills. Remember, this was 22 years ago. Hopefully I have now as well. But she was really good. And I just think that was really important. So I try as much as possible. I might not get it right all the time, but I try to kind of model that and remember what it was like. Because I think the longer that you're vegan, particularly if you're an ethical vegan and you're into animal rights, like I am, sometimes you can forget how it was for you, kind of back then. So, I'm always happy when people are taking those steps. I mean, I do always, like I say, I always do say, look, vegan is the destination, but, however you get there, and obviously the quicker they get there, the better, to be perfectly honest. But, just try it. And what I'm loving now is what's been happening in terms of vegan food in particular, but we're now starting to see with fashion and other areas and cosmetics and skincare, but particularly with food, people don't have to give up their favorite food. So for people listening to this, please don't think of veganism or plant-based eating as a sacrifice for what you can't eat. Really embrace what you can do. I can honestly say that 22 years later, it was one of the best things that I've ever done. If I had my time over again, I always say, no regrets and what have you, but I would have loved to have been born vegan. I love the fact that there are now children being born vegan. I mean, that is just so amazing. And of course, I don't blame my parents. They just, they were taken in by, as I say, all the advertising and everything. But just be really glad that you found out about this. You can be so creative. And also, I think this is really important. You don't have to be a whiz in the kitchen. I'm virtually allergic to kitchens. I do not enjoy, I do not enjoy making food. I will make our breakfast, which is a fresh fruit smoothie, and then I make us a salad for lunch. in the evenings, the only thing I will probably put myself out to do is boil some pasta and then put some sauce on that's from a store. That's it. I do not want to spend my time or my energy making food. So I'm a really good lunch and dinner guest, because then I get to have something exciting and interesting. And obviously sometimes I eat out and what have you. But you don't have to be a whiz in the kitchen. Of course, if you do enjoy, and now of course you can get plant-based meal delivery services. I think they're certainly available in the US, Australia, and the UK. Maybe some available in other countries. So there you can get healthy, tasty, plant-based foods delivered to you, like a week's worth, whatever, delivered to your door. And all you've got to do is like heat it up or open it up and eat it. So don't think that, you know, suddenly you have to become, you know, an amazing plant-based chef. Of course, if you do enjoy making and preparing foods, then, you know, look at it as a nice little challenge and how creative you can be. I think what we're finding now as well with chefs in the past, professional chefs would be very dismissive of even vegetarian, never mind vegan. They'd be like, oh, no. Whereas now, you know, they're finding, you know, it's actually helping them to be more creative, you know, to do amazing things with vegetables to create taste. And now, of course, there's the plant-based meats that can be thrown into the mix as well for those that want to do it. So I think we've seen a big shift in how people perceive plant-based foods and vegan eating, which is really exciting. I mean, I never thought in my lifetime that I would be cool and trendy, but apparently I am, because I'm vegan.
You are very cool and trendy, right?
I love disco. I'm like,
it is definitely an interesting thing to see how this, because I know for me, I'm coming up on what I would call like my 10-year veganiversary.
Wonderful.
You know, when I started seeing through the vegan lens and started, you know, making those adjustments along the way. And, back then, really, there weren't as many options available even then. So, I mean, like, you know, for others who have been doing this since, like, you know, since it became more popular, I would say, you know, it's amazing to see all of the different options that are available today and just how incredible they've gotten. So
absolutely. Lucky, especially on the milks front as well. I mean, I used to go to Sainsbury's, which is a big supermarket chain in the UK when I was there. And the only choice of non-dairy milk was soya milk sweetened with apple juice or soya milk unsweetened. That was it. And now, of course, you go to pretty much any even mainstream supermarkets, you've got, you know, almond milk and cashew milk and rice milk and macadamia, but like, you know, this is, I think, made from pea protein now, because I was in New York recently. So, of course, I tried some of the brands that haven't yet made it here where I'm living in Sydney. And I tasted one from pea protein, which was so creamy. Apparently, that it was called something called half and half. I've never heard of this thing called half and half. So I poured it on. I had some cereal while I was in New York. I was eating slightly differently, and I poured it on some cereal. I thought, this is lovely and creamy. And then my friend said, you're not supposed to put it on cereal, you're meant to put half and half in tea or coffee. I was like, I don't care. But it was so creamy. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, there's so much variety now, and we're going to see that continue. You know, I work in the vegan business world, and you know, this is just taking off. Not with some of the large multinational corporations getting on board now and either investing in vegan companies or bringing out their own plant-based versions of things. That's unprecedented. We've never seen this happen, and it's making these foods in particular, you know, available and accessible both. And I think what it needs to be financial accessibly so people can afford it, but also accessible so people can get it when they're doing their monthly or their weekly shop at their supermarket or their big store, that those products are readily available. So we're still in the boom, and I don't think it's going anywhere. So it's a very exciting time to be vegan and to be eating plant-based.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, because, I mean, you being a part of the media, I mean, you probably just know all these different companies that are, you know, jumping on board. So we have even like, you know, Unilever, Tyson Foods. I mean, we have
Nestle, which is very controversial.
Yes. Very, very, very. So I know that you're probably seeing a lot of that being reported on. What's the general feeling around that in the mainstream media?
You know, the question is, well, is that a good thing? You know, because is it putting smaller vegan businesses out of it? And there's all these kind of arguments, and we really don't know the answer because this has never happened before. So obviously, you know, we're hoping that these companies will see, oh, people want ethical products. You know, they want products that are animal free. They want products that are ethically made and not abusing human rights and as sustainable as possible. And if people are buying that and they're making a profit from that, I mean, one argument is they could put the profits back into the animal side of things to prop that up. Or it's kind of like, oh, well, people want these ethical products. This is where our sales are going. Let's invest more and more into this and less into animal ag. And obviously, you know, from my perspective, I want them to then do what Elmhurst dairy company did in New York, and to actually ditch the animal products altogether and focus 100% on the plant-based. So obviously, if the multinationals could do that, and of course, you know, bring in the human rights and environmental side of things as well, I mean, that would be a whole new way of doing business, and would be really exciting. In terms of mainstream media response, mainstream media has been pretty positive in regards to a lot of these big multinational corporations. Now, that could be because they're big advertisers. But I think they're reporting on the trends. I think when it comes to the food side of things, we're seeing quite positive media. We're seeing very positive media. I think what's happened is we've seen social media has come up, showing, vegan food, breaking down the myths of, vegan food. So we're seeing amazing, decadent chocolate gatto, for example. So I think vegan food is starting to be seen as not just, a bit of salad and lentils, and there's nothing wrong with salad and lentils. I have a salad every day for my lunch, but it's more than that. So I think we've got a lot of myths to break down. So I think in terms of that side of things, mainstream media has been very positive. Where I think we're continuing to see a mix of reporting is around veganism, in terms of ethical veganism and animal rights. Here in Australia we've had big protests, and there was some mixed media. Initially there was some negative media. I managed to get some positive sides, so it was very kind of mixed along those lines. In Australia they've just brought in a new law where activists could be fined up to $400,000 if they go onto a property and record animal abuse. So I think animal ag is feeling very threatened. There's two sides of animal ag. There's the companies like Tyson, like you mentioned, that can see what's happening. They can see where consumer demand's going. They can see that, global demand for meat is unsustainable. So what they've actually rebranded themselves as a protein company. So they're really getting in on it. They invested in Beyond Meat. They've now brought out their own plant-based burgers. So they've rebranded as a protein company. They recognize what's going on, and they're getting on board with it. Then you've got other, companies or other organizations or other parts of the industry that are feeling very, very threatened by this rise in plant-based foods. We've seen laws that are due to come in places like Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi, where some of the Plant-Based Foods Association are putting on legal challenges, because what these states are trying to do is say that you can't use meat-based terms such as burger or sausage or butter or cheese on products unless they come from an animal, even if you've got the word vegan after it. So I think they're kind of the old guard. They're trying to hang on to what's always been, and then there are the mainstream or the multinationals that are more progressive. So I think in the area of vegan business, of vegan food, I think mainstream media overall is being pretty positive, which is really quite exciting. At the launch I went to that I mentioned recently at the Australian alternative meat company that are similar to Beyond Meat in that they've produced these very realistic burgers and sausages. There are a lot of mainstream media there, and I was talking to them, and like some of them, are like just big meat eaters, but they were saying like, I'm really surprised by this. Like they said, if this was a taste test, I wouldn't have known the difference, and I'm really surprised. So I think when they're open-minded, the journalists, then I think that the coverage can be positive. Obviously, what we've got to remember is that mainstream media is run by publishers, and there are editorial staff, and those editorial staff and publishers may have vested interest. The publishers, for example, may also be invested in animal ag, so they're making their money. Journalists might have a family that's a dairy farmer, they might, so there are in those inherent biases. And in mainstream media, the way we were taught is that certainly when you're reporting a news story, like not an opinion piece or even a feature necessarily, but certainly when reporting the news, you're meant to have this person's side, then the other person's side, so it's nice and balanced. But for me, I've always said that, and I think I've even written about this, there's no such thing really as objectivity in journalism, because even the types of stories that the editors or the producers choose to run, there's already biases that are informing those decisions. That's even before deciding what to include in the piece. So there's certainly that to be aware of. And obviously we've seen massive changes in mainstream media in particular, with the rise of social media, with blogging, with podcasters, so that mainstream media has kind of been trying to figure out what's happening, where's our place in this. We've seen, really well-known mastheads either close down altogether or close down their print side of things and focus on online only. So I think they're kind of scrabbling a bit. So obviously when, the dairy industry, for example, comes along and says, hey, we want to spend, a few million or, a few 100,000 with you, that's, I think you can't say, well, that's not going to influence the editorial. And even if the editorial department say, oh no, we're not influenced by that, it's not the case. Because without, some of those industries, they their ad revenue can go down and they might not exist. But we are seeing some change. We're seeing, I think there's an ad out for Aldi, which is an international big supermarket chain, for Veganuary, basically encouraging families to go vegan in January for Veganuary, and saying, you can buy your products in our stores. So I think we're seeing some chipping away, and it's pretty exciting. As I say, some of the old guard are, like I say, they're really being threatened. But I think that shows how far we've come, because why bother? Like, we've had vegan sausages, burgers, forever, like certainly since I've been vegan, and probably before that. But it's only now that the industries are going, oh no, you can't call that meat or big, because they can see that, okay, these are next level. These are, exactly. And people are just, they're becoming more informed, and they're wanting these products. So I think it's exciting times for sure.
Yeah, it definitely is exciting times. I mean, for animals, for, the sustainability of our planet, and certainly, as far as individual health is concerned. Now, as far as not just the big companies that are responding in their different ways, whether they're feeling very threatened and they're trying to get a piece of the pie, so to speak, by making sure they have their non-dairy and their egg-free and their, their meat-free versions of whatever. But what about like the dairy farmers and the cattle ranchers, and the ones that their livelihood has been built, for generations, just handed down, and that's all they know as a business? I know you touched a little bit on a specific farm that actually has made the conversion. Can you elaborate a little bit more on maybe what these, what to expect for these dairy farmers and these cattle ranchers? Yeah,
sure. I think it's an important issue, and I'm glad you've asked that question, because I think there's this misnomer, and I was quoted recently in the media on this, when there were these big animal rights protests in Australia, is that the media will often pit animal activists versus animal farmers. And I think that's not a smart thing to do, because as animal activists, we don't want you to be in that job, but we don't want you to be out of a job. We don't want animal activists, we don't want animal-based farmers to, be jobless and homeless so they can't provide for their families. But what we're saying is we want to get you out of that industry. We want to close the slaughterhouses. No one should have to work in a slaughterhouse, and kill for a living. I mean, it's just horrifying. And there's been studies to show that people that work in slaughterhouses have higher rates of PTSD, domestic violence, because of course, why wouldn't they? So what we really need, and I've said this quite a lot, and I'll happy to say it again on your show, is that we need both the support of business and also governments to work with animal-based farmers to help them transition out of those industries into plant-based industries. We need to see the stopping of the subsidies. The reason that, and a lot of people complain, so why is plant-based, why is vegan meats, for example, why are they more expensive than standard beef, etc.? It's because of the subsidies, and obviously it's different with country to country, but I think in a lot of, particularly the Western countries, the meat and the dairy, the egg industries, they are subsidized by government, so of course they can be cheaper. So I think what we need to see is subsidies being put into plant-based ethical businesses, and to provide help to those animal-based farmers to help transition them out so they can continue to make money and provide for their families, which is ultimately what they want. But like you say, it's that when tradition, it's been handed out, it can be hard for people to embrace change. But I think we have to. I mean, there's a new documentary coming out by Jane Velez Mitchell from Jane Unchained called Countdown to Year Zero, and it's basically about, look, we don't have a lot of time to sit around umming and ahhing about this. The planet is in serious danger. We as humans, who are supposedly the superior species, we're so not, are destroying the very organism that we live on. We can't afford to mess around, and we have to do something different. But I'm not saying that, we should just abandon farmers and say, well, tough, but there absolutely needs to be some support for those animal-based farmers. Some of them can do it off their own back, like Elmhurst, for example. They saw the light and decided to do that themselves, and as far as I know, they're doing well, and they're very happy that they made that decision. But others, of course, are going to need support from government. So I think that's something that's really important, and we need to get onto that as soon as possible.
And it seems like there's probably a lot of challenge with that, right? Because we know that a lot of these big corporations, they're in bed with the governments. There's a lot of money involved in, making sure that consumers are unaware of what's going on in animal agriculture, because when consumers know better, then they obviously make these different choices. So it's very, very cool to see right here and now that because of social media, and because the media doesn't always report on these things, but because of social media and, the brave work of the whistleblowers and the activists that are out there on the front lines and getting this information to people. Yeah, it's amazing to see like how vegan is cool and trendy now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, I think we have to be a little bit, because sometimes veganism and plant-based eating are intertwined, and they are quite different, because veganism is a philosophy of doing the least harm as is practically possible, and not supporting animal commodification, exploitation, etc., and that animals have rights to live freely without our interference. And then there's plant-based eating, which can come from a health perspective or even from an environmental perspective. So they are kind of slightly different. We're certainly seeing the positivity around plant-based eating. I think in terms of animal rights and speciesism, it seems to kind of come back and forth. Sometimes you'll see some really good pieces around speciesism and human supremacy not being the case, but and other times animal activists are still being portrayed as kind of radical, unwashed hippie types. So it's sometimes it feels like one step forward, two steps back. But change, I think particularly massive change on that kind of scale, it does take time. It can be slow, because there are people, like we said, with vested interests who are terrified of change. And I think as human beings we kind of are, sometimes we just kind of are happy just going along with what we know, and that fear of the unknown can be terrifying to some. So so I think we have to try and be compassionate around that, yet at the same time say, look, change is coming. It's coming anyway. The planet is literally being destroyed. We can either go, okay, let's get ahead of this and create change that can be positive for all of us, or we just sit back and watch the train and be hit by the train kind of thing. So it's certainly
it definitely is. Now, as far as like from the business world, because you do predominantly work with vegan business owners and entrepreneurs, which is really incredible, the work that you do. Is there any sort of takeaway from, say, the business and entrepreneurial side of things that maybe people that are just sort of new to this vegan journey or new to eating a plant exclusive diet, is there anything that can be taken from the business world and translated into just everyday living, as far as like maybe our messaging or communication strategies?
I think really just conveying the positive side of this. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, not thinking of veganism or plant-based eating as a sacrifice. So, for example, when a vegan food brand comes into existence, one of the first things it does is establish, right, what's our brand? What are we going to put on our packaging to entice people? Because if you think about it, the parallels are when you go into a supermarket and you buy a product, that business or that company that's producing that product has or has, or they certainly ought to have done, is done everything possible to make you, pick their product off the shelf from amongst all the others. And so I guess, we can certainly translate that in terms of general messaging when you're talking about veganism and plant-based eating. Make it as palatable as possible, so don't complain, go, no, I had to give up this, now I'm eating plant-based, bit of a pain. Instead it's like, oh, guess what I'm now eating? Oh my gosh, I had no idea you could do this and that. And did you know you can still have, you can have a raw, plant-based pizza that's super healthy, or, you know what I mean? You get excited about it. One of the things I think that a lot of people have said to me over the years is, I've followed you, either read your articles, and then when social media came back, I follow you on social, I see what you're doing. And now I'm vegan. And I think that's a mix of things. I think it's a mix of two things. One, be mostly positive. I'd say probably the 80-20, there's an 80-20 rule in business. And I think if you can get 80% of the time be really, really positive about veganism and plant-based eating, the other 20% educate people on what is going on in the in animal agriculture, the atrocities and terrible, terrible suffering, and cruelty that's going on. So, on your social media, 80% of your posts are all, really positive, maybe a recipe here or whatever works for you, just something really positive, or perhaps you've had a health transformation, or you visited an animal sanctuary, and then 20%, of the post, you put in some educational stuff about, hey, look, this is what happens in the dairy industry, and you've got maybe chicks being, shredded alive, which is one of the things that happens in the egg industry that a lot of people just don't know about. So I think really it's, just kind of positioning it as something, be the message. I think when people, if they see you, kind of glowing and, looking good, or just excited and passionate about life and about being vegan, that it creates a bit of FOMO for the millennials, fear of missing out, for those of you aged over 30, if you didn't know what that means. I had to look it up.
The definition.
Yeah. So, make them think, well, I want some of that, so that you can influence. If you're going to a party or a dinner party, take something with you, take an amazing, delectable dessert, and wow people. I think a lot of people are, again, they're in fear. They're kind of like, they're either like, oh, it's going to taste awful if it's vegan. So you can immediately get rid of those myths. And then, of course, if people, what you want really is people like my chiropractor, who I mentioned earlier, who's actually asking questions, and you can send them to resources, So, particularly with him being a health practitioner, he will have been, brainwashed into the whole, you've got to have meat for your protein. It's a way to educate people, but allow them to get curious. So my friend Claire Mann is a vegan psychologist, and, she's really great on the communication strategies. And she always says, invite curiosity. So rather than preaching at people and then they just stop listening, you actually want them to say, oh, tell me more, kind of thing. So, so I think it's important for us as vegan advocates to work on ourselves, to do some personal development on ourselves, extend our communication skills and strategies, so that we can be the best advocates for veganism and also for plant-based eating.
I think that's so wise. That's so awesome. And now, of course, you authored this amazing book, Vegan Ventures.
You have it. That's my book.
Like 3 years ago when I first started my business journey, this was a lifesaver to me. This really gave me
I'm
so
so
much
glad.
insight. So thank you so much for putting this book out. It's fabulous. And I noticed that one of the main themes throughout the book here is helping entrepreneurs and business owners decide whether to use vegan or whether to use plant-based in the way that they position their business. So maybe for our entrepreneurial-minded listeners, maybe you can give us some insights on a lot of the guests that helped you to write this book and strategize on that thought there.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's a real kind of hot topic that's debated quite a lot in the vegan and outside the vegan community as well. I had a Forbes column for 12 months, and I wrote an article about it there, which your listeners can have a look at. And as well, there's a chapter on it in the book. And I ask people on my show, my podcast, Vegan Business Talk, that question a lot of the time. And there's no right or wrong answer. It really depends on your brand, on your product, product and what you're trying to achieve as a business owner. So, for example, Miyoko Shina, who creates amazing vegan dairy alternatives, butter and cheese. Miyoko is all about vegan. She's got a tattoo on her arm, say with the word, vegan. Her branding is, Miyoko's branding is phenomenally vegan. So on the product, the branding, the website, everything, the word vegan is just there. You cannot avoid it. And that's because she wants to demystify the word, and that's her mission. It's part of her brand mission. She's also got an animal sanctuary where she lives. So, for her, vegan is the way to go. And that's great. And it seems to be working, because I think a lot of her customers are not vegan. The word vegan is certainly not putting them off. Now, with other businesses like Beyond Meat, for example, they've chosen to go with plant-based. So some people argue that, plant-based, it kind of sounds a bit softer, like it hasn't got all the baggage that comes with the word vegan. The only thing with plant-based, and I think Miyoko did mention this when I interviewed her, is that some companies, like, I think for me, plant-based means plant exclusive. Like you mentioned the term plant exclusive, 100% plant-based, but apparently some companies, some businesses are using plant-based to say it's just based on plants, but there could be some animal ingredients in it. Right. So I think that's where you've got to be a little bit careful. But for some people, like there's the Plant-Based Foods Association. And I think they've named themselves well in some respects, because they have members who don't just sell plant-based only products. So obviously they've got members like Miyoko and Tofurky, for example, but they've also got, say, Campbell's Soup. I think Campbell's actually, which is a multinational company, they actually left their previous trade association, I believe, to join Plant-Based Foods Association. So they allow companies that are don't have plant exclusive products, but they do have products or brands under their parent company that are. So, that makes sense. If you're a service provider, you might not want to go with vegan, or you might. It depends. Like Claire, my man who's my friend who's a psychologist, she's got her Communicate 31 website, but then she's also got her website Vegan Psychologist. So she's because she wants, vegan, she wants to help vegans. My partner Tracy is a clinical hypnotherapist, psychotherapist and naturopath. She doesn't use the word vegan anywhere on her website. And as a result, she gets, she obviously is vegan, and the whole business is run from a plant-based perspective, but she gets sheep farmers, cattle farmers come to see her for issue who wouldn't otherwise, if they just went onto a website and thought, oh, she's vegan, I'm not going. But, they come along to see her, and depending on what their issue is, she's turned many, a cattle farmer and sheep farmer onto a plant-based way of eating. So I think you've really got to make the decision of, regarding your own products, your own brand, your own aims, who your audience are. One person I interviewed was Heather Mills, who's an amazing British female entrepreneur, has V-Bites. She uses both vegan and plant-based. When she's marketing to the vegan community, she uses vegan. But when she's marketing to, to the flexitarians, to the, pre-vegans, as we like to call them, then she may use plant-based. So, I think there's no right or wrong answer. And I think it really just comes down to your brand, your mission, and your audience, who you're trying to sell to. Some people say, oh no, we almost must use the word vegan to demystify it. But for me, if you need to be a bit stealth about it in order to get people through the door and then kind of turn them vegan, or lead them into this way of life,
hashtag eating like you give a damn,
then then do that. So there's no right or wrong answer. Just have a think about what's going to work for you. And some people have changed as well. Like when I've interviewed the book, interestingly, I think it was Georgie from Addiction Foods here in Australia, said that initially she was using the word vegan, but then there was this was before it kind of gotten, kind of more popular. And she got a lot of some hassle around it, whatever. So she decided to change to plant-based, or to phrase it slightly differently. But then there was a business in the UK who was also in the book, the 222 Veggie Vegan, it was called. Was it called 222 Veggie Vegan? Something like that. But then they've changed it to 222 Vegan Cuisine. So he went the opposite way. He was kind of avoiding using vegan, but now he's kind of like, no, we're going to use it. So you can change, and sometimes you might need to experiment. Obviously, if you've got products, it's going to depend on what you put in your packaging. One of the things I recommend with if you've got a product with, say, a food product, for example, with an actual package, you've got to decide how much you want to put on the front, because sometimes if you put things like, vegan or animal free or dairy free, gluten free, free from sugar. Sometimes people think, oh, that might taste horrible. So what you might do is just maybe lead with something on the front. You might want to have vegan on the front, or you might want to have it on the back in small letters. I do recommend having it at least on the back in small letters. So for the people who are looking for those labels, we can just flip the product, because vegan, we've got eagle eyes. We will flip over, we'll look at the ingredients. Do you know what I mean? To make sure. And if we see the word vegan there, or a vegan logo that's been approved by either Vegan Action in the US, Vegan Society in the UK, that immediately says to me, good, that the company has thought enough to put that on. And I will often buy a product over another product. Like, I might look at the ingredients and go, well, there's nothing animal based in there. This probably is vegan. But if another company, same product, they've actually got a little vegan, either a vegan friendly or say one of those logos, I'll think, right, I'm going to buy that because they've gone to the trouble of letting me know. But we've got to remember that vegans at the moment, we are not the majority of the population yet. So, if you feel that, putting it at the front of your product is, might put your particular audience off, then either use plant-based or, just put it in small letters at the back. So I think there's ways to do it where you can kind of appeal to all the markets.
Very good. Very wise. So as we start to come to a close, Katrina, which makes me incredibly sad because I hijack you for the rest of your day and my evening now that my sun is setting.
Oh, yes.
Your sun is just rising over there. But I know you have a fabulous mentorship course, Vegans in the Limelight, in addition to your book, Vegan Ventures. So tell people where they can find that. Tell them a little bit more about it, how they can work with you, and where you are on social media.
Yeah, sure. So the best place to find me is on my website, which is veganbusinessmedia.com. There's actually a lot of free resources on there as well. There's blog posts, there's my podcast, Vegan Business Talk, where I interview vegan entrepreneurs and we dive deep into their business strategies. So for anyone who's an aspiring or even existing vegan entrepreneur, that's all free and it's very popular and people really like it. There's the book, as you've mentioned, and then I've created a program. It's a 12-month online PR course and group coaching program called Vegans in the Limelight. It's basically for vegan business owners and entrepreneurs, and that includes service providers, it includes authors, typically non-fiction authors who are building a business around their book, creatives, coaches, consultants, product manufacturers in whatever business. And what it is, it's a program for those who at the moment don't yet have the budget to hire a publicist, because if you hire a PR agency or a publicist, that's quite a high investment. I do a very limited amount on a case-by-case basis of done-for-you PR services. But otherwise, it's quite an investment. And for some people, they're not ready for it, or they're at a particular time in their business where they don't have the budget for it. And they say, okay, either I want to do it myself or I want someone on my team to do it, but they haven't got any experience in PR or how to approach the media the right way. Now, it's not rocket science, but there are ways to approach the media that are going to maximize your opportunities of getting media coverage, which is free publicity. And then there are ways to get blacklisted and journalists hit the delete button. Obviously, you want to be in the former. So basically, the course, it's video training. It's also got templates. So there are pitch templates where you can kind of like plug and play, fill in your own information. A pitch is basically a short email to a journalist with an idea. There's the same thing, templates for press releases. So you can just plug and play, put your own information in. Throughout the 12 months, people can post questions on the learning platform. They can also post their pitches and their media releases on the platform before they send them to journalists. And what I do is I'll come in and give them a bit of feedback. So I don't do the PR for you. I don't do the writing for you, but it's like having somebody, holding your hand along the way to say, you need to tweak this, change that, and do this before you send it off. We also have 12 monthly live group calls. So each month you can get on the group call. And again, we can either go through your proposed pitch or media release. On those group calls as well, we also do a more general profile building tips. So for example, I will sometimes on the call, I will look at someone's LinkedIn profile or their website and say, right, you need to tweak this and tweak that to make it, more likely to get you customers and sales, and also for media as well. So so you can find out about that. I also do one-on-one coaching as well by the hour, and all of that's available, as I say, on the veganbusinessmedia.com website. People can sign up for the newsletter, and you'll hear from me typically once a week with either what the latest podcast is, or it might be some tips that I'm offering. Again, that's all free. And then if people want to work with me more closely, they can either do one-on-one, enroll in Vegans in the Limelight. So yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes for the listeners.
Thank you.
Katrina, it has been such a joy having you. Thank you so much for your insights and your inspiration, and just really appreciate having you here on the podcast.
Oh, it's been lovely being on the show, Stephanie. I know what it's like, particularly because I know you're just beginning the podcast, which is really exciting. And I know when I started my own podcast, I was really grateful for guests that would come on because, it's really great to get the conversation happening. So I love your passion. I love what you're doing, and you're, reaching new audiences with this. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Aw, thank you, my love.
That was Katrina Fox, award-winning journalist and founder of veganbusinessmedia.com. Be sure to check out the Vegan Business Talk podcast if you're a current or aspiring vegan entrepreneur. And if you're starting a vegan business venture or are currently a vegan entrepreneur in need of PR training, go to veganbusinessmedia.com and check out Katrina's course called Vegans in the Limelight. And don't forget to tell her you heard about it here on the Eating Like You Give a Damn podcast. Be sure to join our community of rebels in the Eating Like You Give a Damn Facebook group for vegan-friendly recipes and support. Request to join us at eatinglikeyougivadamn.com/group. If you want podcast updates so you see what's coming up and to see what I like to eat, follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Eating Like You Give a Damn. That's all, folks. Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you like what you just heard, leave a glowing review and share this show with your friends so together we can help more people make more informed decisions. New episodes release every Monday. And until next time, veg on, rebels.